Welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. Today we have an exciting bonus episode for you guys. Jonathan and I just spent the weekend in West Virginia, and we went to the Flatwoods Monster Convention. It was the first convention they had there. It took place in Sutton, West Virginia, which is a town right next door to Flatwoods, West Virginia, where this monster was seen in the 1950s. So before we get into the story of the Flatwoods monster, Jonathan, overall, what was your experience this weekend?
It was a really good weekend. We did basically 2.5 days. We left, good old Roanoke about halfway through on Friday. Got to Sutton in the 5 o'clock area, and checked out their downtown. They've got all the classic West Virginia architecture that I always enjoyed. The basically houses, carved into the sides of hills, and the old concrete steps everywhere. Kind of close together architecture. Good picture windows on the main street, an actual main street. It was it's a fun little town.
Yeah, it definitely was a fun little town. When we got there on Friday, the first thing we went to was the West Virginia Bigfoot Museum, which is attached to a cute little country shop right in downtown Sutton. And I think they did a really good job. They've been open for a couple of years now. They have a lot of different pictures and Bigfoot, like foot casts type of things. And the lady who owns it, she was interesting to listen to her talk. She talked about how she was a skeptic before. Well, actually, her son is the person who runs it, but it's like attached to her shop, so she's involved as well. And she was talking about how she was a total skeptic before, but she said the amount of people that come in with stories has turned her into a believer, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that was neat. Hearing her talk about how things to do with that, and with the Flatwoods monster and all these other types of things are starting to revitalize their area a little bit. They've got people moving in, businesses opening for apparently the first time in quite some time. It just seems like the community there has really embraced what all of that is, to the point where we even we had to grab some supplies and wander into Walmart, and you go the door in going into their Walmart says you get a gigantic mural including the Flatwoods monster, and it's just they really have embraced that, which I think is pretty awesome for sure.
They have a lot of different themed things. So there was like a restaurant that does themed sandwiches like alien and UFO and flatwood monster sandwiches and that kind of thing. Different signs and billboards. There's a huge chair that is like, painted and in the shape of the Flatwoods monster that you can get your picture taken at. So it was definitely a cool area. We enjoyed it a lot, and it's very beautiful there. The hotel we stayed at, the view, like, yes, there was a highway like right there, but it's just like mountainous views. Every morning we woke up and it was just completely covered in fog, which was cool and spooky to see. So it was a really cool area, and I think we will definitely be going back, hopefully to the convention again next year, because we had a really good time. So, Jonathan, why don't you tell everybody the story of the Flatwoods monster? So I know when we decided to go to the convention, I had never heard of the Flatwoods monster before, and so we watched a documentary. But we definitely learned a lot more about this event while we were there. So tell us the story.
On an early September evening in 1952, three boys in Flatwoods, West Virginia, saw a bright light crossing the night sky. They collected one of their mothers and a few more friends along the way and went to investigate. Upon cresting the final hill adjacent to the what seemed like the touchdown site of the strange light, witnesses reported seeing a pulsing red light, and near the light, they said, they saw a tall humanoid being with a round red face and a pointed hood-like shape behind its head. According to Graybarker's Fate magazine, pulling from tape-recorded interviews, the figure was approximately 10 feet tall, with a dark green or a black body. Witnesses reported a horrible smell, many of them feeling nauseous afterwards. Later on, when local law enforcement arrived, they stated they saw and smelled nothing. Those witnesses spent the rest of their lives telling this story, and none of them ever wavered in any real meaningful way that I've ever heard of.
So this is a story that's been told in this community since this happened. Obviously, like I said, or Jonathan said, the town has really embraced this. What I think is interesting is while we were there, we listened to one of the speakers. His name was David Spinks, and he's a paranormal researcher, investigator. He's been doing this for a really long time, from West Virginia, I believe, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he had shared a story that is not as well told that happened the day after this incident. There was a man, his wife, and their 18-month-old baby in the car, and they were driving down, I believe, a country road, and all of a sudden their car stopped. It would not move anymore. So the husband gets out, he's trying to figure out what's going on with the car. His wife's looking behind him, she screams, he turns around, and there's this creature, the same creature that the kids and their mom had seen just the night before. So he gets into the car and they're trying to hide, and the creature comes up to their car, places its hands or claws onto the car, and it's kind of just like checking it out for a little bit, and then I guess disappears. It's reported that after this happened, like the paint on the car actually like disappeared. The car where the creature touched started rusting. So this to me is kind of interesting because the man involved gave only one interview. He said he was basically traumatized by this. He told his story once, he never wanted to talk about it again. So I just think that's interesting. To me, this is just my thought process personally. A person who's reluctant to tell their story almost feels a little bit more believable than people who want to tell it to everybody sometimes, because it's like why wouldn't you want to share that with people? Like, I mean, it seems like this man had a real, traumatic reaction to what happened to him. So I think that's interesting. What about you, Jonathan?
I do think it's interesting. I'm not surprised that someone would only want to tell the story one time, though, especially in that time frame. Because I mean, yeah, people who had those experiences, I mean, back then it could ruin your life.
Mm-hmm.
Up until 80s or 90s, it could still ruin your life. I mean, for a long time, and Whitley Strieber, who's one of the most famous abduction cases alive, started talking about this stuff in the 80s, and it did ruin his life for a long time. And that was just the 80s. That's within our lifetimes when that happened, and people were more open-minded then than they were in the 50s for sure. And now you get abducted, and you're gonna you can go on a podcast or be on TV, and there might be some people who laugh at you, but you're not gonna lose your job over it. And that time frame you maybe could have. So I mean, I do kind of get it. I think that the amount of bravery it would take anyone from that time frame to talk about anything that was not average, normal, leave it to Beaver was pretty hardcore.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk about that the people or the kids involved, they did share their story, they did do interviews, but actually the owner, or I believe the person who runs the Flatwoods Monster Museum, Andrew Smith, he was actually neighbors with one of the kids and who's obviously was an adult at the time, but had shared like he didn't really talk about it all that much. He wouldn't talk about it with his coworkers. Like people were like, I worked with him for 10 years and I never once heard the story. It seemed like he kind of wanted to just be a normal person and not completely defined by this incident.
Which is completely understandable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It is understandable.
And so that's kind of, how we went through Friday. We, experience, explored a little bit, experienced the town, went in, had some local food. If you're ever going through Sutton, West Virginia, check out Maria's Mexican. That place was great. Um, Next morning, it's a one day conference, woke up, got signed in with the folks at Wild and Weird West Virginia Paranormal Talk. Them, along with Dave Spinks, were the people putting on the show. To be honest, you could not tell it was the first con. It did not have that early days feel. They didn't have, you know, the kind of things like I've been to a bunch of conventions in a bunch of different areas, like smaller ones, but still like a fair number of comic book shows, things like that, trading card stuff. And the early days for all of these things always are obvious. You can see people making mistakes with scheduling. The documentation is wrong. People try to get charged wrong on amounts on stuff. None of that happened. It was super smooth. The scheduling was right. The vendor room was amazing. They really strong vendor room, which that can make or break a con experience for sure, no matter what your subculture is. But I was just as someone with event planning background in my professional history, I was very surprised in how they pulled off, and it's part of the reason why we intend to be going back next year too. Like they did an awesome job.
For sure. Yeah, I really loved the vendor room. We spent a lot of money there. A lot of interesting artists with really cool products. T-shirts and stickers and pins and books and
Cut
keychains of like, oh,
cut gems and stones, and we
yeah.
had there were people doing readings of different types, like anything you could think of. There's some gaming people there, selling dice and dice towers and stuff, like anything you could think of that was peripheral to this kind of stuff, this the shared interests types of things. They really nailed it.
Yeah, definitely. We met some other people who also do podcasts, so that was cool. Different things that we're going to check out and listen to. A lot of books. We bought a lot of books, but it was really awesome to be able to buy somebody's book, speak with the author, get them signed. So I enjoyed that a lot. And Miss West Virginia was there. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Mrs.
Oh, sorry, Mrs. West Virginia. Sorry, I cannot remember your name, Amber something. But what's interesting about her is during the pageant, her dress was a representation of the Flatwoods Monster, which was awesome. So she was there with her dress, taking pictures with people
It was
and that
actually
kind of
really
thing.
cool. It was very cool.
Yeah, it was a cool dress for sure. Um, so what did you think of the talks? We were there for 3 out of the 4. The last one we were super tired and super hungry, so unfortunately we didn't make it to the last one of the day, but the 3 that we saw, what did you think?
Well, the first talk was Andrew Smith, curator of the museum there. He was super informative. He had a lot of great talking points. Talked a lot about how different and yet the same the recounts of people are, and kind of reminded people to take into account. Everyone sees things in their own way. People remember things differently. Time passes. He's talking about being a neighbor of one of the Mays late in the gentleman's life. And he had to remind him multiple times, hey, listen, I was a kid, I'm 80 now, these things get blurry. And which I totally can relate to. I'm 42, and things that happened to me when I was 9 or 10, I've got good memory of, but things can get fuzzy, and that's a real thing that happens to humans. And all of these people are humans. They all had to live lives. It's kind of one of his points, and throughout that, I think the dude did a great job. It's a really enjoyable presentation. He shared he had a good light side to it too. He shared some of the memes he's made over the years. He's a funny dude for sure.
Yeah, that was entertaining for sure. The talk I found the most interesting was Ray Zemansky. He was in the Air Force stationed at Wright-Patterson, which is in
Ohio.
Ohio. Okay. Um, and that apparently is a pretty famous place with connections to Roswell, correct?
Right. Supposedly, whatever it is that did land in Roswell, the physical objects from that were transported there. And also, supposedly, this is not something that he's saying. This is just like, folklore says that basically any physical debris from any kind of situation like that gets sent to Wright-Patterson. What is provable is that there are a lot of engineers there. He is one of them. He was a civilian contractor working for the Air Force for decades, and so he knew a lot of people in that. And when he got to the end of his career, he started asking questions that probably would have ended his career if he had done those questions at the beginning of it. And he's written a series of books, one of which we purchased. We're very excited to read. What he has written, what he calls the 50 Shades of Gray's nonfiction series.
Yeah.
And it's just he's had conversations with people who have done past, no, what do you call it? People who have done hypnotic regression for traumatic events when they were younger, and they ended up being related to experiences, some of which may or may not somewhat parrot things I've experienced when I was a child. So I find that interesting. I'm looking forward to read. That's the book we got, actually, is the one dealing with the hypnosis, because it's the one that closest is, to my personal story, or potentially.
Why don't you share with them, like, what is the parallel between what
Well,
you may or not have experienced?
they can listen to episode 1 of the podcast,
And
and they'll find out about owls.
right. Well, basically what he said was that owls, or sometimes other types of animals, but he specifically said owls, are used as screen memories. So a lot of times people have like an alien encounter, and the memory is covered up with something else that is much less threatening. So the person who he wrote his book about, Victoria, her screen memory when she was a child and she started having encounters with aliens, because this has gone on her entire life, it was like little ant creatures. So she's had several abductions. It's multi-generational. Other people in her family, including her, I believe, grandson, have been abducted. So yeah, I'm really excited to read that book, just
For sure.
to, hear her story, especially, these people who've had these experiences more than once. To me, is just kind of crazy.
For
It's
sure.
like they keep coming back for them for more, and it's like, well, what is that purpose? He talked about like scoop marks, which is not something that I necessarily heard about, but
I'm
that
gonna have to do
happens.
some more reading about that myself.
Yeah, which is something that happens with a lot of people who have been abducted. It's like a chunk of skin is taken out. Um, she believes that she had eggs removed. So for what purpose? We can only guess.
Another one of his books is basically a long form, all day long interview and trip he took with Travis Walton, who one of the most well known, maybe the second most well known abductee in American history, behind Whitley Strieber, I would say, at least in modern times. Um, Subject of the film Fire in the Sky, which for being a 30-year-old movie, really holds up for what it's worth. As far as, it is still a very good film. but he goes through and has this big long form interview slash conversation with him over the course of a day, and he wrote a book about that. Which at some point we will pick up at some point, but at this point our metaphysical reading list is around 30 books long. And if you
Yeah.
pile them all up, they would probably be about the same height as Brittany. So we're a little on hold for gathering more materials, at least until the end of the week when I get paid and decide to spend $300 again. So you know how it goes.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we're interested in learning about and reading about. But yeah, Ray Zemansky, his books, I'm super interested in checking out more. He was
Great sense
very
of humor.
right, he was very entertaining. At the end, he did the Men in Black thing where he pulled out the mind eraser. I forgot what it's called, but that was funny.
Neuralizer.
Neuralizer. Okay, yeah. So that was funny and fun. One thing that he talked about with his research with Victoria was how after she had gone through hypnosis, one of her memories was about, this alien type that looked very much like an insect or like a praying mantis type creature, which I thought was really interesting because we did just read Communion by Whitley, or we did just watch Communion by Whitley Strieber. And one of the creatures he saw was very much like that, like a praying mantis type creature. So I thought that was an interesting connection of two people from two very different time periods and walks of life having a similar experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Second talk of the day was Dave Spinks. He is a pretty prolific author in when it comes to things like Bigfoot, things like UFOs. He's been on multiple television shows. He's been in multiple documentaries, and is very much a hands-on researcher guy. He does the work, and same thing with the Wild Weird West Virginia guys. They're all three of those dudes. They're actually, they're investigators. They're not just reading this stuff and talking about it, and they actually put in the work on that. So I think, personally, I think that's very interesting. Dave had a bunch of interesting anecdotes about West Virginia. One of the things that those folks mentioned actually at the end of Mr. Zemansky's talk, they came up and they had everyone who had an experience of some kind raise their hand, and most of the people in the room raised their hand. And then they said, who has talked to someone about that experience, and raise your other hand, and like a few of us raise our other hand. And then it said, if you have reported your experience to someone that can do something about it, or document it in some way, keep your hands up. If not, put your hands down. And I think one person still had their hands up. And, from my perspective, from someone who has had experiences and has, done a fair amount of research into, quote, reporting agencies, I don't blame anyone for not doing that. But, because I have not done that. My reporting is, 30 years later, I'm talking to you folks on my podcast, and that's it. That's it for me. And anybody who, comes on our show and talks about this stuff, that's their way too. But, as far as, these, things like MUFON, things like, I mean, the laughable blue book when it was a thing, decades and decades ago, it is, it's not always something that feels easy or correct to do. But they do make a good point in that if you do tell someone, if you do get it out there somehow, you could be the connecting dot for someone else or for a group of someone else's. And it could be your story that causes a mystery to be solved. And they're 100% right about that. And that's one of the reasons why we want to do this podcast is, maybe my, potential screen memory of an owl that you can listen to in episode 1 if you want to listen to it. Could be someone else's tipping point of, wow, I had this happen 6 times when I was a kid, and I thought I was alone, and then they find out that they're not.
Yeah. I just want to clarify what MUFON is because I had not heard that before, but that is the Mutual UFO Network. And I believe that is nationwide, where there's branches in
Every state, I
every
believe.
state.
I believe every
So,
state has their own branch.
and so it,
And sometimes, some of the work they've done has been very good. From what I've read over the years and heard over the years, it does seem like it is, however, a little region specific. As some of the people who, the folks doing this are doing great work, and they're very, diligent. And then there's times when not as much. But anytime you get a group of people together doing something, you're going to have some people doing a great job and some people who are less. So that's understandable in some ways.
overall, I had a great time. This was a new experience for me. I've never been to a convention really of any sort. I've been to like conferences professionally before, but nothing like this. So I had a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to finding more of these. Looks like in June in that area there will be a Bigfoot convention, so maybe we'll check that out. I would definitely go back to this next year, and looking for ones that are local. So it was a really good time. Really interesting speakers, and yeah, I loved the vendors. I loved going shopping. That was fun.
For sure.
So then on Sunday, we got to go to the actual Flatwoods Monster Museum, which is in Sutton. Again, the town next door to Flatwoods. And it was a cute little museum. There's a lot of really awesome like artwork that different people from the community have made about Braxy, which is what they have called. They have named the Flatwoods Monster. Because it's Braxton County. So I love that cute little nickname. But yeah, I thought the museum was really well done. What did you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's great. It's very well put together. They got a lot of nice merch. They got a lot of historical stuff.
Yeah.
Some flyers, some things from over the years to show, kind of the evolution of how the cultural impact has happened with that story over time. And I mean, there's references in multiple pieces of pop culture now to deal with the Flatbush Monster, and I think that probably is going to continue and grow through time. If you find yourself wandering through West Virginia, I definitely would suggest giving them a shout, see what's up. Uh, Great little museum, great little town. We really enjoyed our time there. All right, thanks for listening, folks. This has been a special bonus episode of whatever the hell this podcast is called. Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. Follow us on social media.
And if you have a strange story, make sure you reach out to us. You can private message us, you can email us. We want to hear from you guys. And we are looking for people I want to talk to people who have had some UAP or alien experiences. So if that is you, reach out to us. Let's chat. Let's hear your story. Share it with some other people. It might help them be a little bit braver.
Links are in the description.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a strange story you want to share with us, email us at seekerandskeptic@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you soon.